Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Squeezing the Juice. This week it's my pleasure to welcome to the show Sammy Kingston and Bertie Millis, CEO and COO respectively of Virtual Umbrella. Welcome to the show, guys.
Hi, hello.
Hey, thanks for having us.
You're very welcome. Thank you for joining us. I thought to kick off the conversation, it might be good to reflect on a really recent announcement that was made last week by the Office of National Statistics, and then we'll move on from that into the kind of Virtual Umbrella story. But that announcement last week was that VR headsets have now been added to the inflation basket, which was a relatively new concept to me when I read it, but ultimately it means that the ONS are now counting headset sales, VR headset sales, and using it as a measure for inflation. So, yeah, just your reflections, if you will, on that news item, really, and what it effectively means.
Do you want to start, Sammy? Do you want me to jump in?
You jump in because you were far too excited about this when you saw it. Basically, Bertie thinks we've completed it. We've completed the game.
We've done it.
We've done it. We're there. We've hit the target. So
I agree.
Go for it,
let's all retire. Bertie.
Yeah. So at least for the overly optimistic of us, you can kind of gauge this as okay. Well, if VR headsets are being used as a consumer device that we use to gauge inflation, then surely we've hit the mainstream. So every single conversation I have at every discovery call, every meeting, every sort of conference about, VR is still quite new. It's still like an emerging tech. It's like, well, actually, it's not quite emerging anymore. It's being used to measure inflation. It's considered that much of a consumer good that, the statistics office see it as something stable that they can use to measure the rise of consumer goods over time. So surely it means that we've made it, right? We've been working in this industry for so long, all of us, fighting, this sort of fighting our way out to say, it's VR isn't this sort of scary new technology. This is something pretty sort of normal these days. It's a mainstream commodity. And I'd like to argue that this means that we've kind of done it. Obviously, it doesn't necessarily mean that, but at least to me, I'm going to use this as my argument going forwards.
And Sammy, how about yourself?
Yeah, pretty much the same, really. I think I remember doing early talks and things and speaker engagements where people would be like, "Oh, when do you see us all having a headset on our desk?" And I know that obviously for us within the immersive bubble, we probably have about 20 on our desks at every one time. But I think that is becoming more of a day-to-day thing where at least it might not be on the desk, but it might be in a box maybe somewhere in the house. So we're just kind of pushing to that point of it will eventually come out of the box and maybe sit on the desk or maybe sit in the living room. It might still have a bit of dust on it, but it will be used at some point. I think that is that's exciting. I think we all have to kind of congratulate ourselves a little bit and a little pat on the back for still pushing it to get to that point, which is really cool, I think.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think for those of us that have and you guys have been around for longer than we have, but for those of us that have evangelized VR for a long time now, I suppose it's often frustrated me actually that the sort of fixation almost on the going mainstream thing around how many headsets are in how many homes to prove out that this technology has got a future. And I've always sort of had a bit of an issue with that even being a metric really. But I had to sort of smile last week when they announced that. And like you say, let's take a moment to celebrate it, I guess.
It's one of the other things they added as well was yoga mats. So I'd like to think about the fact that VR headsets are now, on par with yoga mats in terms of novelty things that you might have in your house or, fairly common for people to have at home.
I was quite surprised yoga mats weren't already on the list, if I'm honest.
Yeah.
But it did give awesome opportunity for stock imagery in news articles of people in VR headsets on yoga mats. So let's enjoy that.
Yes.
Great stuff. So we mentioned, how long, some of us and you guys in particular have been in the VR game and in XR. I believe we've got quite a milestone year at Virtual Umbrella this year. In fact, in preparation, Tell me what we're celebrating at Virtual Umbrella this year.
Oh, we are celebrating our 10th year of running Virtual Umbrella. It was, I think, officially our birthday yesterday, so the 25th, if you don't mind us dating,
Not at all.
podcast. And we are officially celebrating on Friday in Brighton, because we spent 5 years for Virtual Umbrella in Brighton, and it only feels right to go back to the seaside and celebrate where probably the majority of our work and creativeness and fun times were held. So yeah, 10 years of Bertie and I figuring this industry out. So yeah, I think that's a pretty cool milestone. And yeah, I mean, we didn't think we'd pass probably year one. So I think we've, yeah, it's pretty cool.
Massive congratulations, guys. That's seriously impressive. And yeah, just 10 years is always a milestone. But I think in this industry, it's a particularly special one. So yeah, well done. Sorry, I just made my producer, John, jump out of his skin because we hadn't discussed I was going to use that. So sorry, John. I suppose just to follow on from that then. So 10 years working with VR and then other forms of extended reality as well. I suppose the question I had was, when you think back to those early years versus what you guys are doing now for your clients in facilitating and supporting deployment and adoption, what's changed in that decade in terms of those sort of challenges and barriers and pain points and things that you are really supporting your clients with?
I think back at the start, none of us, no matter how professional we seem, none of us had any idea what we were doing. All of us were just trying to sort of figure it out, make things work the best that we could. And then you compare that to these days where, you're having technical discussions about device management systems and configurations and deployments and global rollouts for VR across workforces or, across like advertising charity campaigns. And then you think back to start where it was, oh yeah, so I've got this massive flight case. It's got a computer in it that costs 1.5 grand, and I've got a headset in there, and the whole thing weighs about 20 kilograms, and I've got to carry this with me either into the car or onto the train, or I've got to try and get it onto a plane and be really nice to the border control when they start asking me what's in it, and I'm trying to explain stuff to them. Compared to now, where everything's so much smaller, people know what VR headsets are. You can really sort of tell how everything's become, I'd say, a lot more clarified and a lot more simplified these days. Compared to those early days. At the start, a lot of the things we were doing were almost like showcasing, and lots of evangelizing of the technology. So I think actually our first ever paid gig for Virtual Umbrella was going to EGX, which is the Eurogamer Expo. And that happens at the XL, not the XL. It happens at the NEC in Birmingham. And being there and helping a game developer who had created a game for the first prototype version of the HTC Vive. And literally, we spent 4 days there just putting people in headsets, explaining to them what this thing was, what they had to do. And then, nowadays, it's almost not necessarily a lot more grown up, but you could say it's a lot more grown up in terms of we're having, again, conversations, strategy about technical rollouts, things like that. We've kind of gone past evangelizing now, and now it's okay, how do we actually start to use this stuff, and how do we use it effectively?
It's now the longevity of that tech, isn't it? It's not the oh, I need to sell you this thing really quickly and maybe you'll use it once. It's now the how are we going to implement this into our strategies long term, past 5 to 10 years, rather than just saying, oh yeah, we'll just add it to our thing and we might use it again. Maybe we'll revisit it, or actually it probably won't last the next couple of years, which was a lot of the conversations we were having in the beginning. If you look back to like the Gear VR, which was one of our I loved that headset. Like that was the one thing that we were using all the time. And yes, we had so many problems with it in terms of those phones would just go flat. They would get hot. The batteries would get big. But in terms of like, yeah, if you like look back, that was really not anything in terms of like, it wasn't really immersive in any aspect, but it really did sell in the future concepts. I think even as it's like, I think Samsung are coming back into the conversation now, aren't they? Around that headset. But yeah, really now it is longevity. It's, yeah, we don't really need to sell the headsets anymore. It is that long-term goal, which I think's massive. Yeah, Bertie put that really well.
Yeah, I think I too have a fondness for that headset, the Gear VR. I think it wasn't a juice project actually. When I was back as a filmmaker in my first business, and I first started to get distracted by the sparkle and the newness of 360 video, and we showcased our project that we did then in that headset. And again, it was just, that was when VR wow moments really were VR wow moments, I think, in terms of the audience that we were putting into that experience. So in terms of what your work looks like now as opposed to then, I guess you've always been involved in this kind of live event world and festivals and the likes. In fact, I think Bert, you and I first met face to face at Edinburgh Fringe one year. I can't remember which year that would have been even, but yeah, is that still a mainstay of what you do, and how has that kind of changed over the years?
Can you take this one, Bertie?
You go first.
Yeah. So I think one of our first projects in the industry was an event. So I think I've got an events background, and so has Bertie. So I think that kind of naturally came into what we were doing. So one of our first big events was VR UK, which was at Ravensbourne College/University. Very grateful to them for paying us a nice invoice back then. And I think at the time, I think we were just helping connect the dots in terms of contacts. We weren't really there doing anything physical, but over the years, that's changed in terms of our tech support and the behind the scenes of a lot of things, because fundamentally our belief is that, we really believe in the technology, but it can be showcased and demoed wrong a lot. And that is what we're not big fans of. And that's not us trying to have an ego about it or anything. We just really believe in safety and, people having safe spaces and things like that. So we've kind of ended up working at majority of the UK, especially in the UK, festivals, film festivals. And a lot of the time people have come to us anyway going, could you come and support, because we know that you'll do it right, which is lovely. And then that's kind of transitioned into doing sort of corporate events, which you don't hear us talk about because they're behind the scenes and they tend to be internal events. But those are probably some of our biggest events we ever do, but we don't talk about them, or we're not allowed to talk about them. Yeah, so that's kind of, we still do a lot of them. And I think for us, it's now working on the events that we really want to work on, or, seeing new challenges, because a lot of the time people can take what we've sort of given to them and then they can just roll off that, and they've been trained or whatnot, and they tend to come back to us with larger problems maybe a couple of years down the line, which is great. But yeah, so we still do tackle quite a few big ones in the year. London Film Festival has been one of our biggest ones that we've done for the last 5
years.
5 years, yeah. Which is great because that's transitioned and changed over time, as well as the technology. And it's just, we just want to make sure that we're offering the best advice and support, because, that's where a lot of, the people that aren't in the VR bubble are getting their first experiences. And we want to make sure it's accessible as possible and done right, really.
Yeah, I always sort of think of you guys as you've been looking after people in VR for 10 years now. You'd have been putting 16-year-olds in headsets in 2015 who are now in their mid-20s, and you've been there for that journey. It's interesting to me to think about how that sort of onboarding has maybe changed, and I know you guys quite rightly take that very seriously in terms of looking after people, keeping them safe, keeping them comfortable. Do you want to talk to that a little bit in terms of what does a good onboarding look like?
So for us, what we'd say to people is that the experience starts when you enter the room. It's not when you put the headset on. There's think about the way you might do like immersive theatre, or you might do like an immersive type of thing around, mood setting, expectation setting from the very start. You have to make sure that they feel like they're in the right space, that they feel safe, they feel secure. Then with the headsets themselves, it's getting people to understand, what they're about to do. Make sure they don't feel nervous at all. So normally it's something along the lines of, have you tried VR before? Yes or no? Okay, this is what this headset is. These are the controls. This is what you're going to use when you're inside the headset. Because so many times you put the headset on and you realize you haven't explained the controls, and then they can't see the controls. And how do you do it? So you show them the controls beforehand. They'll give you a funny look. You say, "Don't worry, you'll be able to see You'll be able to see the controls inside the headset as well. And it'll make a lot more sense once you're in there." Once you put the headset on, the first thing you'll be able to see is X or whatever they're going to be. If things are blurry at all, give the headset a little wiggle, normally just moving it up and down your face. You'll find a sweet spot. Go put the headset on now. Put the headset on. They'll tell you it's blurry. Get it fixed for them. And then once they're in, essentially a lot of what we end up doing, kind of off onboarding now, but it's kind of around recognizing, body language or cues when you can't see, half of someone's face. So once you get used to a certain experience, you might know that, okay, around 90 seconds in, something happens on the right. So everyone normally looks to the right, or they jump or something. But then you start to recognize, okay, well, I'm in a room and I've got 30 people in headsets. That person didn't look the same way as everyone else. Let's keep an eye on that person. Sometimes it's that somehow their headsets ends up facing the wrong way and they're actually just oriented backwards to everyone else, which is fine because normally they can figure it out. Or sometimes people just very politely still sat there in the loading screen waiting for something to start. Because when you're in a headset, it's quite easy to sort of lose track of time as well. They might think, oh, it's only been about a minute or so. Maybe it's just waiting to start. So just sort of being like hyper observant with people as well, and recognizing that sometimes people might not be comfortable to ask for help, but recognizing when they might need it. And then also making sure that everyone is very, very or super aware that you are there to help them and that they feel safe and comfortable being vulnerable and asking for help. And then being vulnerable as well means they're also opening themselves up for the actual experience itself. I think years and years and years ago now, we did some work with a company called Breaking Forth, and they did a little experiment where they discovered that they found that immersive content was 4 times as impactful as traditional flat screen stuff, which means that, something that's 5 minutes long in VR has the same impact as something that's 20 minutes long as traditional 2D media. But more importantly, it means that it's much easier to emotionally impact someone. So just being aware of those types of things as well, and knowing when we need to be supportive or making people feel like they can open up and they can, take those emotions in if they need it to. And then also because they feel safe, they're not going to take the headset off halfway through and just check their bags still by their feet and stuff like that, because they know they're in a safe space where they can enjoy the same way you would if you're at a cinema, right? You wouldn't stop halfway through the cinema and go check that your car's still in the car park. Because you know that it's there. It's it's about making sure that people can actually really be engaged and enjoy it for its sort of full potential. That's a really waffly answer to onboarding, but I hope that kind of conveys how much we care about this.
No, it's solid. I think I'd seen you'd released a blog a while ago now, I think, on what onboarding should look like, and yeah, you've hit on all those notes. I think it really is about looking after the individual and ensuring that they have the best possible experience, which kind of does bring us on really nicely to an area I wanted to cover, which was the sort of emotive power of virtual reality. And that's something that you guys in your sort of position will have seen quite viscerally, I suppose, over the years, in terms of people's immediate responses and reactions when they come out of headset and out of experience. So do you want to talk a little bit to that, your view on the power of VR, and by all means referring to any previous projects you've been involved in or showcased and that have moved people?
I think we've had a real privilege to be a part of quite some very, very moving pieces over the years, and again, this is why a lot of people pull us in terms of showcasing and demoing, because they know we'll do it right, or we'll have some good pointers potentially on what should that care look like after they've taken the headset off. So to Bertie's point before, where he said about, the VR experience begins the moment you walk in that room. It doesn't matter if that's walking into a building or a train station, a shopping centre, everything should align with that, but it also aligns afterwards. So there has to be enough space for people to sit and emote and take in what they've just seen. And a lot of the very emotional pieces we've worked on, we've always made sure that those kind of things are set out. So we've done a couple of pieces to note. So we worked on the Grenfell piece that came out quite a few years ago. We were asked to demo that experience, and part of the offboarding of that was that they had a section outside with a sofa, tea and coffee area, and they also had NHS mental health staff on site so that people could have someone to talk to. And the important thing also with that is that a lot of people don't necessarily want to just take a headset off and leave. You need to make sure that people can actually just sit in their chairs, because especially at a lot of big festivals and demo spaces, there can be sort of some people just want to get the numbers through, which I understand, but there can be sort of a lack of awareness that actually people will not want to move out of that spot. So we've had to kind of cater to those kind of situations in the past. But the Grenfell piece was incredibly emotional, and it affected Bertie and I as well, because we had to be the sponges for emotions for people coming out of those headsets. So that was a big one. That's always kind of stuck with me. And then another one would be around, remember Unrest VR, Bertie? I don't know if you want to talk about that one, and then maybe I can talk about Anonymous.
So Unrest was like a VR accompaniment to a film called Unrest, which was about someone who suffered with chronic fatigue. And then as part of this sort of, whereas an independent film, they did like a cinema run across independent cinemas across the country. And they engaged with groups of people who, might have, CFS, chronic fatigue syndrome, or they might have loved ones who have it. As part of that, they're invited to come and see the film screening. So groups of them would come through, and then while they were there, they'd be invited to try this VR experience, which would normally have set up either in the lobby area or just outside the film screen. And it was about 10 minutes long. So people who arrived early, it was something for them to watch, something for them to try. It wasn't like, and yeah, it was an idea of like almost like a mood setter type thing. How do we do something that fits with the film but doesn't necessarily just copy the film? People, coming out of that were with a huge range of emotions. People saying like, this is the first time I've kind of felt seen, I've understood, or like people have said, I've never been able to explain how I feel. This really helps. I think we had a few doctors, notable Dr. Keith Grimes, the VR doctor, who I remember him saying about how this really helps him. It's like a really important insight for how understanding what patients are going through, trying to create things like this. How can you create another way or another medium for people to understand your symptoms or how your symptoms feel? It's like there's one scene in it where the character that you embody is just sat in the bathroom, and then they say about how their body starts to almost like overload with pain, and then everything sort of catches fire around you, and like that's how it feels to them. It feels like just this overwhelming sort of like heat and pain, and then moments later it's like frozen. Everything's frozen around you because of how your symptoms are spiking, and sometimes you're hot, sometimes you're cold, but it's not just hot and cold. It's super super extreme with these things. So that was this incredible insight into the power of this stuff for helping people feel seen, and then also conveying these very sort of metaphorical, very difficult to explain sensations and feelings and experiences that people go through. I just wanted to mention as well about what Sammy was saying with Grenfell, Our Home, with that piece. That was commissioned by Channel 4, and it was Parable, who were the production company behind it. And forever thankful for them for enabling the NHS support staff. 'Cause we mentioned like it'd be really great to have support staff there because it's such a big thing, and the fact they were able to actually make that happen was really really validating. I think for being like, yeah, this stuff does actually have power, and it being taken seriously by, you know, production companies and studios saying, yes, we understand that we're making something and we have a responsibility to our audiences. So yeah, very grateful for them for that as well.
Yeah, it's huge. Yeah, really, really great examples. Before I ask Sammy if you could speak to your own kind of personal project that really does relate to this topic, I think there's a couple of others that that you've mentioned to us off camera around how yes, VR is great for as an empathy tool, and you know those types of projects that you've just been talking to there are all about empathy and understanding and giving people new knowledge. But equally, VR experiences sometimes can just be about transporting people to another place or to another mindset. So I think you've talked about a couple of projects. The Easter Uprising project, which is now obviously a kind of really old piece of work, but actually you talked about a particular individual person who came out of that experience.
Oh yeah, so that was a piece commissioned by the BBC, and as part of that, they took it to the Imperial War Museum. So it went to the Imperial War Museum in London. It went to the Imperial War Museum North in Manchester, and I was basically charged with taking it up there, making sure that it was run, and spent 2 weeks up there with it, basically doing demos every single day, showing it. And then during that time, a very elderly lady came through in a wheelchair at the time. I explained to her what the piece was, and she was like, "Oh yeah, I was there." I was like, "Yeah, so this is the Irish uprising of 1916." She's like, "Yeah, I was only 2 at the time, but I was there, and this was us trying to celebrate, the 100th anniversary of it." And things like that are absolutely like wild to me. And she came out of it and was just, I think, kind of amazed and blown away, and just saying like how this, it's just like how it's almost like, reliving, or like, reliving, like it wasn't her memory, it was like the memory of her parents and her grandparents who had lived through that because she was too young for it. But almost, reliving, like almost like ancestral memory. Like how else would you ever get to sort of revisit these types of things that are quite integral to you and your character and who you are as a person? Things like that were, absolutely, wild and sort of really remarkable.
Yeah, they're the moments that stick, aren't they, in terms of thinking back over some of the work that you do. Sammy, if I can come to you, obviously I don't know how often you guys are the content producers of work that you are involved in. But Sammy, you obviously had a very personal story to tell through VR in the past. So could you give us a little bit of insight into Anonymous?
Yeah, of course. So, so to give a bit of background on that, so in 2018, my parents, so my mum passed away in 2018, and in 2019, I made a 360 piece around my experience of being a COA, which is a child of an alcoholic. I'd never publicly spoken about it, apart from obviously friends and close family, and especially not to the industry. So I obviously was going through a very rough patch, as you can imagine. But I'm the kind of person that when something bad happens, I tend to kind of try and find a way to either share it or emote it or write it down or something. And I started writing a script basically as I was planning funeral and all this kind of stuff, because I was slightly worried about forgetting memories. I was worried about forgetting things I'd gone through when I was a child. And obviously over the years we'd worked on some of these like incredible projects, working with like Breaking Forth back in the day, and the Grenfell project, which I visually really loved, in terms of the way that it was produced. And I thought to myself that, well, I've worked with some brilliant people. Why not try and give this a go myself. And I think also around the time there was a lot of artists that were getting into the industry who were really struggling with paying for things and thinking that it was too expensive or not being able to get funding. So I kind of challenged myself to make my own 360 film with a very limited budget, partly to kind of showcase that it can be done with, you know, you don't need tens and thousands of pounds. You can do this sort of under, I think in total it was maybe £2,000 or something. I think it was about that £2,500, I think, that we spent. But yeah, so the piece itself is a letter to my mum, and I go through the 5 stages of grief basically, and I'm sat in sort of a circle, almost like an AA meeting, and I talk to camera, basically this sort of letter to camera, and then each chair represents the 5 stages of grief. And obviously for me it was very hard to film that, but I also was very aware that if I was going to showcase this to the world, it had to be done right in terms of demoing and showcasing. So, you know, I wasn't there wasn't any interactive side of it or anything, so that kind of made it easier. And I think the story was quite powerful itself. So our thing was that whenever it was showcased, I would always be on site. So I didn't want anybody else demoing it in terms of an introduction, which I guess is probably quite unique to the way that a lot of VR stuff is done, because you want it to go to a mass audience. But for me, I thought that it was most important that I would introduce the film and then be the person to put the headset on you and to be the person to take it off, so that you're going to see me inside the headset anyway, which kind of gives you a slight bit of comfort level. But also I know that there is a high risk that there is going to be a loss of emotions coming out. And I think one of the places that we did a showcase, we did it in our offices in Brighton at the time. And they had sort of a little area at the top of the office that they allowed us to use. And we'd sort of set out a large enough space so that only 5 people did it at a time. So they sat in the circle, similar to the experience. And we said to them sort of, you know, afterwards that they don't have to leave the building. They can walk out if they want to. We're not going to get offended. But we basically said that there's snacks and drinks on hand, and there's a sofa and a table so that they can go and sit. And we also offered sort of like cue cards for people to write down what they were feeling. So I basically said you have several choices. Like, you can walk out this building, you don't have to come back in if you don't want to, or you can just have a breather, go grab something to eat and drink, or why don't you go sit at the table and write how you're feeling, or just anything you want to write about the film. And I think that worked well. We did do like individual demos as well, where it was just a one-on-one situation. That also worked equally, and it allowed those people to have a one-on-one conversation with me afterwards as well. I don't know if is that everything, Bertie? I can't remember if there was anything else we provided, or there was obviously some information from the charities that I worked with at the time as well, just sort of some knowledge and some flyers and things like that if people wanted to take it away. But there was no pressure to. Yeah, I think I've covered everything, Bertie. Was there anything else I did, or we did together?
No, I think you've covered everything. Yeah, it's just the real emphasis on allowing like a space to dwell and to decompress, especially from something that was so hardcore for a lot of people. You had a lot of emotions from people afterwards. So I remember you getting lots of hugs.
Yeah, lots of hugs. Yeah, we ate a lot of chocolate, I think.
And how was that for you, Sammy, from the point of view of, I guess, the whole experience of writing and producing that piece of work, and then sharing it with the world? Was it cathartic? Was it therapeutic for you? Just interested on how you reflect on it now.
It's definitely a mix of emotions, because obviously going through it, I had to emotionally put myself into places for the filming. And I had obviously an amazing team. So obviously Bertie was there the whole time. And then I had Marisol Grandin and Mary Matheson, who came on board basically to get me to that point. And I remember at points like Mary being like, come on, push it. And I was like, oh, she's like, no, if you want this to emote, you need to get to that level. And I did. I can't watch it now. I think I watched it a few times during editing, but I don't like watching it. So I feel like it kind of, in terms of grief, it helped me let go of a lot of things. But I did find during the demoing and showcasing that I had to give myself a lot of breathers afterwards. So I had to have a lot of space between demos, because obviously, again, I'm showcasing my grief, but I'm taking on a lot of other people's pain or emotions, and that's a lot. And I think we obviously, going into 2020, we were going to tour it. We were going to go to lots of different places, but because of the pandemic, we didn't. But actually, in hindsight, I think it was a good thing, because I needed the break to kind of go, we've done it. It's done its thing. Maybe one day we'll revisit. But I think it did exactly what it needed to do at the time. Yeah, very proud
Amazing.
of myself for doing it as well.
Well, I was just about to say you should be immensely proud, because it must have been a roller coaster of an experience to do. And out of interest, you're a mum yourself now. Will it be something you think in the future you might share with your? Is it a daughter you got?
Little boy
with your little boy. Here's an Apple Vision Pro from the 2020s, or have a look.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, he's already, he knows where the office is in the house, and he knows there's a lot of stuff in there he can't touch. So yeah, he's definitely been playing with headsets when we're not looking. So yeah, I'm sure we will introduce him to things at a time.
Yeah, I think that's it though, isn't it? That sometimes these things are kind of great to look back on as projects years down the line. I find that with some of the old film stuff I used to do. It's nice to dust it off occasionally. Okay, fantastic. So in terms of what else you guys are up to at the moment, I know that there's a lot of kind of more corporate and enterprise based stuff that you guys do that, as you mentioned, it's not always easy to talk about or you're allowed to talk about. But I suppose one thing I wanted to try and kind of explore with you was people's perceptions of barriers to adopting VR, because we work a lot in the enterprise space, and it still surprises me how often people will just come up with reasons why virtual reality headset based experiences are going to become problematic or going to be difficult for them to deploy at any kind of scale. So yeah, I just wanted your input on that, and any sense you might be able to give of actually how big a deployment perhaps you've been involved in the past.
So to answer to give some my thoughts on the first question around people coming up with reasons why VR might not work. I think a lot of the times, that you've got to have bravery. You've got to just know going in that, the first pilot or the first time you show this, it is going to suck, and it is going to be really bad, and it's going to be really awkward. But that's part of the process. That's the reason why, you do dress rehearsals in the theatre. It's the reason why you have driving lessons. You don't just go straight to it. It's part of the learning journey that every person or every company or every team has to go through to get the understanding of how this stuff works and the way that it's going to flow in your particular use case as well. Especially as you get to working with larger and larger enterprise clients, you start hitting loads of external factors and all these sort of extra stakeholders or things that you didn't necessarily consider, like around IT permissions and configurations, and starting to put security certificates onto headsets, or internal politics around, there might be, an innovation director, but this project is to do with learning and development. But now innovation wants to be involved because virtual reality is involved somewhere, and suddenly you have to start dealing with all these different people that in a smaller organization, it'd be a lot more straightforward. But a smaller organization wouldn't necessarily have the time or the power to make this thing happen. So I think, yeah, there has to be like a level of acceptance of, okay, yeah, we're going to be figuring this out, and we are going on a journey with doing this. And in terms of like, yeah, comprehensive understanding of, all the factors that might cause issues along the way, I don't think you're ever going to have that. So it's just about being flexible and adaptable as time comes. Like one of the biggest things that we have is around IT, and it's where we're doing work for enterprise clients with learning and development, which is why I mention it, and it's on top of my head. But where they're doing workshops or sort of like offsite days for teams, suddenly you're in a venue that you haven't been to before, you don't know, and you've got no idea how well the Wi-Fi works. And you might be like, one of the pieces that we use is virtual speech, which is a virtual reality application where you can practice public speaking. And as part of the application, it's got some AI elements built in where it will listen to what you say, it will send what you say up, and then it will send back down feedback. And that's based off some sort of really sophisticated GPT model that they've worked on with lots of professional speakers and stuff, where it will say, you use too many filler words, or maybe you need to think about this, or from the analysis, we can tell that your specialist subject you were talking about was this, but you missed these things, or this was incorrect. It can also do stuff like AI generated questions. So if you want to do a talk and you want to practice getting question and answers afterwards, it will start to generate like questions at you. But that data going up and that data going down, that's fine for one headset on like a hotel Wi-Fi or something. But say you've got 40 people in the room and they're all doing a virtual speech assessment of their own. That's a lot of bandwidth to go through, just a general sort of hotel's Wi-Fi access points. So you start getting crunch coming through there, things start slowing down, people stop getting feedback and all that kind of stuff. So it's understanding where, all these external factors that you might be able to influence, you might not be able to influence, and then how do you overcome those? So we would do things like we'd preload all the software so they wouldn't have a strain with the actual initial stuff downloading. Then we'd make sure we step people off, slightly staggered, so that not everyone's getting the data sent up and sent down again at the same points. So things like that are just worth considering for where inevitable pain points do come up. Then in terms of like the scale of some of the projects we've worked on, we worked on something a bit similar to this, where it was I'd say like mid-level employees at a large company who were doing a 5-day offsite program. It's all about prepping them for when they move into senior positions. So they do leadership skills, they do stuff around creativity, around pitching, around being adaptable to changing scenarios. And one of the things they have to do is they have to pitch to a pretend CEO. They have to pitch as if they are coming in as like a new client, or not a new client, like a new agency. As part of that, they have an actor. They get an actor who is the CEO of this fictional company, and they're in a different room in the building. And then the team meets the actor through virtual reality in a virtual meeting room. So they go into the virtual meeting room. They meet the actor who is playing. The actor is playing the executive assistant to the CEO. And they go like, oh, so the CEO thinks this, and this, and it's all about you don't necessarily meet the CEO right away. You meet people along the way. You meet the gatekeepers along the way. What can you learn from them for when you have the big meeting? And then later they meet the same actor in person, but that actor is now playing the role of the CEO. So they don't necessarily realize it's the same person because they've got a virtual avatar. But what it does mean is that if they've been really mouthy and disrespectful to the executive assistant, that then comes back to them when they meet the person in real life. And I think that's just about sort of making them realize that just because you're not necessarily there in real life, it doesn't mean you can get away with things that you might not be able to. But that was for a cohort of I think 200 learners, and they are put in teams of 5, I think. So we ended up having something like over the course of an evening, I think we had maybe like 40 teams coming through, and then there were some people that did other stuff and some other activities as well. If you're having 40 teams come through doing things like this, it's a massive strain on bandwidth. You have to start thinking about, we've only got a certain amount of headsets, so we have to start, resetting headsets and making sure we're wiping stuff down for hygiene, and have to do big group onboardings to explain how all this stuff works. And you have to be really, really clear about stuff like, okay, when you enter the room, there will be a password you have to put in first. The password is this. And then you watch as inevitably like 5 or 6 people get locked out because they weren't listening, or they instead of putting in like the login, they start putting in their work login or something and get locked out, stuff like that. And then so we're essentially on the ground like facilitating all of that. So it's almost like a mix of like a workshop facilitation and then the tech management stuff as well. So we're doing a lot of enterprise things like that, and it's it's fun, it's chaotic, but the analogy we always give is that we're like a swan in that we're really graceful above the water, and then underneath we're just paddling like hell to try and stay afloat a lot of the time.
Great. What I love about that example, though, is that it talks to the point that it's worth it. The VR headset experience, as opposed to perhaps other ways you could experience that type of piece. It kind of has to be VR headset, and so all of that kind of paddling furiously under the water is worth it to give those 200 people that very individual, completely immersive experience. And that's, I think, what comes up a lot in our conversations is, that there's other ways to experience, inverted commas, immersive content, but actually VR is best experienced in virtual reality headsets for that very reason. And it can be done at scale, and it's where the likes of you guys come in to really make that feel like a smooth and well-oiled machine that the client is kind of putting on. Just quickly, because I'm aware of time and I can speak to you guys all day about this stuff. In terms of immersion, and I've been talking about this since Apple Vision Pro was announced with lots of people in the industry. Where do you stand on 180 versus 360? Obviously, the Apple Vision Pro is natively supporting 180, and there seems to be a real kind of trend and now leaning towards 180 immersive, in inverted commas, content. Where do you guys sit on this?
Oh, gosh, that's a fun question. 30 initial thoughts before I internally panic.
Whatever floats your boat. That's my opinion on it. It's that 180 is, I'd say it's closer to, it's kind of like an interesting blend of 3D television and an immersive, in that you've got a massive field of view, and you have the ability to sort of move around a bit and look around a bit, and it does heighten the experience significantly, I think. To me, at least, I wonder where the balance is between, if you look at like the scale of how immersive is it versus how easy is it to reach lots of people. I wonder where, at least Apple's sort of spatial 180 bits on that, and I haven't had enough experience to sort of make that gauge myself. But people have been doing 180 and putting it through headsets for years. Like, you have dedicated 180-degree cameras, and you can produce really, really powerful work with that. And I think part of that is that if you're presenting it in a headset, you're taking away people's other senses. It's not like they can just glance down at their phone halfway through, or they can look at the scenery. It's that even if it's only 180 degrees, you are 100% in the experience.
Great point. Yeah, great shout. I think if depends on where you come from with it, right? Like, I'm a sort of traditionally a 360 guy, I suppose, where immersive content's concerned. So as soon as I'm in a 180 experience, I'm just automatically looking to my right and to my left to almost find the edge of frame, kind of ruining it for myself in a way. But yeah, you make a really, really valid point. You are still immersed in the sense that the outside world is the outside world, and you're not seeing it. You're not distracted by it. Good stuff. Okay, cool. Just to wrap, I think then. So in terms of what your top tips would be for people out there watching, listening, who maybe they're in an organization and their workplace has tasked them with looking at VR. It's still astounding high numbers of people out there who are yet to really leverage the technology for their own use cases, be it training or storytelling or brand engagement or anything. What are your top tips for people who are kind of just about to step foot down this road?
I think, especially if like you're thinking like innovation, internal teams and things who have definitely been tasked with something like go get a headset or something, I would actually spend a lot of your time trying these headsets out and trying some content. Because a lot of the time people will come to us and they still don't understand what it is, but they know they've been tasked to do something or get a quote or get some budget for something. So I really do think spend more time actually looking at things and identifying what exactly it is you're looking for, because a lot of things can be done and facilitated by other means and other mediums. VR might not actually be right for that thing you're trying to hit. And then secondly, I'd say once you do start those conversations, be open to be flexible with trying out different things, because again, like there are different headsets for reasons and there's different types of contents for different reasons. So I think it's just having some if you can allow it in terms of budget, just trying to be a little bit flexible in that. And then like what we always say, it's like use it for the right reasons. Use it, don't use tech for tech's sake. It's finding the right things that work for your agency, company, individual, creative, whatever it is. Research, try things, and use it for a reason. That's what I got, Bertie.
Good stuff.
And I would add that at the start, it all will seem confusing and needlessly complex.
Yeah.
That's just the nature of this type of technology, but it does get a lot easier. And as soon as you understand how a few things work, everything just kind of clicks together. And then the other tip I'd give is, it's not a top tip, it's probably more of a medium level tip, is that if you're really not sure, you phone up Owen and he'll sort it out for you.
Exactly.
Or you phone us.
Might cut that bit. Yeah. No, but it's right, isn't it? That's what we're here for ultimately. Whether you're in the content part of the industry or the deployment and the facilitation part of the industry, we're all working towards the same end goal here, which is that people have fantastic experiences with XR and overcome those initial barriers or perceived barriers. So no, brilliant. Great. So just finally to wrap, it's 2035, Virtual Umbrella is 20. What does the world look like? What does your working life look like, guys?
Gosh, have we got like millions of pounds by then, Bertie? Do you think? Can we quit? No, I think we are going to be a lot more. I think there's going to be less headsets. I think in whatever capacity they are, I think there will be less, but they will be what we need and what we are looking for. And fingers crossed that the back end stuff that we like to fight with will be very seamless. Maybe Bertie and I need to go and work for the big headset companies to sort that out, but that's the dream. And then I'll be in my 40s, so Bubba will be bigger and probably going to school or something. I don't know.
And what about I know social impact's really important to you guys. What about from that perspective? What kind of impact would you hope to have in another 10 years' time?
I think continue just doing the type of stuff we're doing and continue trying to help everyone. Like the original reason we started Virtual Umbrella to begin with was that Sammy and I went to a conference right at the very start in February 2015. And when we were there, we just saw all these amazing developers working on projects and creating all this stuff. And it's like, this is like the grassroots. This is we shouldn't just work for our individual companies. We should try and do something that collectively raises up and grows the entire industry. So I think that no matter what, we'll continue doing that really. Just basically, most of the work we do, it starts off as how can we help you out? What can we do that's going to make your life easier, and continue doing that. And then I guess in an ideal world, we've had a few opportunities to do it, is we'll get some really, really wonderful, big corporate clients who pay us lots of money. And then we use that to help subsidize and fund smaller creators who are working on, really amazing projects. So where we can do work for free for the, the stuff that really needs it, I'd love to be able to continue doing that really.
Fantastic. Brilliant, guys. Yeah, I knew I'd enjoy this conversation. Thank you so much for giving us your time and coming on to Squeezing the Juice. Obviously, I think we'll put links and what have you in the show notes for people. But if there's any way you want to make people aware of how they're best following Virtual Umbrella, I'd heartily recommend people do, because I think you guys are an invaluable resource and source of insight often to the world of VR. So yeah, how are people best finding you guys?
Bertie, where's the best place right now? We're in LinkedIn.
I was going to say LinkedIn as well.
Yeah.
Previously it'd be other social sites, but they've become much less appealing in recent years and months. I'd say LinkedIn. Follow Sammy. Follow me, or not follow. Connect with us on LinkedIn, or just contact us through the email, our website, or just through like a DM or something. We're always happy to chat and always just down to have a conversation about anything really.
Exactly.
Great stuff. Okay, superb. Well, all that it remains for me to say is happy birthday once again. Enjoy the celebration. And seriously, thank you for your time today, and thank you for everything you do on behalf of us at Juice, but the industry. I think you guys do an invaluable job, and the industry in the UK is only as healthy as it is, I think, in no small part to your efforts. So thanks, Bertie. Thanks, Sammy. Have a fantastic summer, and enjoy the celebrations, and enjoy the little one growing up. And
thank you.
Could have gone on all day here. So I'd love you to come back another time and do another episode with us.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
That'd be great.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Squeezing the Juice wherever you tuned in. If you haven't already, please do give us a thumbs up or a like or a positive review. It really helps as we try and grow the show. And also, if you subscribe, you'll never miss an episode. Indeed, if this was your first episode, please do go back into the library and watch some of our previous eps with really inspiring guests from the world of extended reality. Until next time.